new one, but I'll give some very definitive advice. Don't threaten to release your ex-partner's naked pictures. Quick way to get a restraining order.
Yeah.
What is going on, everyone? It's Mark Real Jr., the Father's Rights Attorney, and you are watching another episode of the Father's Rights Playbook. And on today's episode, I have Orange County Attorney Rafael Serrano, and we're going to talk about the financial cost of divorce. Rafael, how are we doing today?
Good. How are you, Mark?
I'm good. So one of the most difficult issues we deal with in family court is the cost of litigation. Mm-hmm. So we usually tell people up front, there's no way to know how long your case is going to go, how much it's going to cost. We can generally tell you that, hey, the average divorce in Orange County is going to be $15,000 to $20,000. That doesn't mean yours is going to cost that much, or yours could cost significantly more. So I'll start out with here. When a client in the strategy call asks you how much is their divorce going to cost, what is your advice? What is your response to them?
The advice is that, it's not always under our control. We try to keep as much control as we can to keep costs down. But a lot of times we can do everything we can to be as reasonable and efficient as possible, but we can only do so much. If the other party is not also with that same mindset, we can be easily going into a very long, expensive process. Oftentimes I've had cases where it's a very small case in terms of finances and not a lot in terms of discovery, but opposing counsel and in terms of strategy to try to keep costs up to hopefully force the client to not have an attorney, goes in this long protracted discovery game, and now we have to go forward with all these responses to discovery, and now you're looking at another $3,000 or $4,000 to respond to requests that don't get us anywhere.
Yeah, takes two to tango.
Yeah,
short.
Right.
If the more you agree on, the cheaper your divorce will be.
Sure, and that's the problem, is that we try to minimize our costs as much as possible, but there are a lot of times where we can only do so much, and if the other party wants to play the long protracted war of attrition, then we don't have a choice. Discovery,
ex partes, multiple requests, requests for 217, which is an evidentiary hearing, can really drive it up, and one side can do all of that.
Yeah, and one thing that I've done to kind of preempt that is I've had cases where opposing counsel will say, we're going to file an ex parte request for order on these issues. And I said, if you do file that, we will, I'm putting on notice that we're going to request in response a request for sanctions and attorney's fees because it's an appropriate use of the emergency request for our orders. And they filed a request, lo and behold, it got denied outright, not even set for a hearing. And now we're filing a request for attorney's fees and sanctions and a host of other financial issues because it cost our client a considerable amount of money to respond to something that shouldn't have never been filed in the first place.
Yeah, I guess when things do get litigious, the answer or the way a lot of it can be resolved is you do have some swords in the family code to recoup attorney's fees if the other side's acting inappropriately. If they're just not agreeing, you're kind of stuck.
Right.
But if they're acting in bad faith, you do have some options to be able to get some attorney's fees.
Yeah, and so you try to set them up for that. So you try to say, look, put it all in writing and give them plenty of warnings so that if and when they do go forward, then you have you can tell a judge, look, I tried to resolve it to not get to this point, and here we are regardless. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So takes two to tango on it. Being reasonable, that's a big one. The more that you and your soon-to-be ex-spouse, your ex-partner can come to an agreement on, the less issues we're going to have to fight over, the cheaper it's going to be. Now, once we get into litigation, I think this is a big thing, is we'll get a case where it should be pretty straightforward, but then some things from the other side or on our side maybe go off the rails. What do you see as the biggest issues that men run into or get themselves into that drive up their costs?
Oftentimes we're just going into requesting small. We're going too much on small stuff. A lot of times if he have a good situation, and we don't really need to go into a request for orders to for things that aren't really going to change your visitation, your parenting time, or your overall rights as a father or a parent. And so I think we can get caught up in the weeds sometimes And I think it's important to really take a step back and consider whether it's really worth the fight, whether you really want to go forward and spend the money to get what you want, because not everything's guaranteed. Every case is different. And do you want to spend the money to get what you may not really need in the end?
Yeah.
And so
the other one that goes along with that is, I think, the need and desire to file ex parte hearings.
Yeah, it just gets out of hand.
Especially here in Orange County, because someone has to go to the courthouse, has to stand there and wait.
Right.
It's similar cost to having a day of trial.
I believe now we can do e-filing. That just changed.
Okay.
But before, we had to wait at the attorney window. Takes a lot of time for the filing to happen, and then there was, on some chances, the court would actually want to hear from the parties, so we had to have an attorney on standby just in case the court wanted to hear argument.
Yeah.
Which is rare, but still. The ex parties can go really expensive in a blink of an eye.
Yeah. And then probably the one that gets things off the rails the most is you have a divorce, you have a parentage case ongoing, and then she hits you with a domestic violence restraining order.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I view it is, although I think it's the restraining order is used as a tool to gain leverage in a lot of instances, most of the time there are some self-inflicted issues that the man caused that led to the filing.
Right. And, it's no mystery. These two parties are either getting a divorce or separating. They should not be together in a lot of times. And there's a reason why they're getting separated. So, the violence, depending on, whatever took place, if there needs to be some measures to prevent that in the future. But oftentimes, if you have a cooling off period and they're no longer together, that usually solves the problem, unless you have a really more serious case. But
my thing is, don't be antagonistic. Like, you don't need to one-up them. You don't need to feel like, because I think that's one of those things that generally being disagreeable just wears on the other parent. And we know statistically the woman is much more likely to file a restraining order. So it's like every single time you're antagonistic, that you make a comment, that you call her a name. One that I've seen in our firm recently a lot is threatening to release like naked pictures. Like, you're just opening yourself up to, we have restraining order trials that have cost guys $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 over a 10-day trial.
Yeah. It's hard because that's, someone that you know or love and is the mother of your children. So they have that soft spot and they're able to push your buttons. And so it's really hard to remove yourself and make sure that you are not reacting in a way that's going to hurt you in your case.
Yeah. And I know this, I said it's a new one, but I'll give some very definitive advice. Don't threaten to release your ex-partner's naked pictures. Quick way to get a restraining order.
Yeah. It just, everything that you send to your partner needs to be in the context of, is a judge going to read this? And what will the judge think when they read it? Exactly. I mean, I've had screenshots where the contact is saved as not a very nice word. And we don't want to tell, that's not a good idea. So don't have your other parent as a certain...
We need a poster in the office of all the names we've seen in people's phones. Like, you send us a screenshot and it says, that bitch.
Yeah.
Or dumb bitch. Or something.
I think cockroach at one point, and it was a cockroach emoji. And I said, please stop that.
Can you change it to her name?
Yeah.
That's a big one. I think it's just like, I get it. It can be frustrating, but when you get antagonistic, they're going to react and they're going to respond. And for whatever reason, women are much more likely to just take the gloves off. And once they do, ball's kind of in their court of how expensive this divorce is going to be.
And it doesn't get you anywhere. I mean, it may feel like you're, getting something off your chest, but it just makes the case way more complicated. Emotions get higher, and at the end of the day, no one wins in that situation.
Yeah. The other one too, I think that's a big one in terms of keeping costs down, efficient representation, is how you're turning over documents to us, and then your communication towards us in the firm. So, for example, it's like if you just drop a disheveled 500-page folder in our office, well, someone's going to have to go through and organize it. Someone's going to have to get it in the system to be able to tag it for evidentiary purposes. And then the attorney's going to have to take time to go through all of it.
Right.
We also see this with exhibits, like send us the information and you send us 700 screenshots on your phone instead of what's actually relevant.
Yeah, so you got to work closely with your attorney and find out what we need. And when we tell you what we need, be very as concise as possible so that when you do give it to us, our paralegals don't have to spend a lot of time and attorney's fees or just money in general to make sense out of it and organize it.
Yeah.
Digital is great, so we don't have to go through an actual physical file and scan it.
That's a big one. That'll save you a lot of time, a lot of money. If you could, you digitize your file, you have it organized. We don't have to scan it in.
Right.
It's all right there. If you have Adobe, you can you can bait stamp it, so it's like all right there.
Right.
We had Ryan, our managing attorney, is in a long trial right now. And one of the things that he's like, hey, it's going to cost me $10,000 to synthesize all this information. I need you to put it in X order for me so I can make sense of it. The guy did. And I mean, and this is an expensive divorce, but he saved himself $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 over the life of his case by just being organized so he can give an organized file or give organized answers or produce organized documents to his legal counsel.
Yeah, and that the client knows our documents better than we do.
The client knows the facts.
We have to go through it and figure out from what you give us, but you would know what you have. And so it's a lot easier if you can give it to us in a very digestible format so that we can very easily figure out what's going on.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you, Rafael. To our listeners, to our viewers, a lot of really good information on how to keep your attorney's fees down. To everyone, we'll see you guys next week or on YouTube or Spotify. We'll see you guys next week. Father's Rights Playbook.